but just by a bit.
But
Just by a bit. To me, my mental and physical health was my main priority over my ATAR and UCAT and so on.
Akshan, welcome. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. I'm really excited for our discussion and to hear a little bit about your sort of not so secrets to success for high school.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up and where you went through school as well?
Yeah, thank you, James. So I guess I'm from Bendigo, and so I went to a school called Girton Grammar. So Bendigo is about maybe 2 hours north of Melbourne, so it's a bit rural. But I pretty much completed all my schooling there. And ever since then, I've completed that. Now I'm here in Monash Clayton. So,
Awesome. And you're studying
medicine.
Okay,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Clearly, you've done very, very well.
Yeah.
How was your experience of high school?
I think it was a really very diverse experience. I got a bit of everything, I'll say. I got a lot of extracurriculars I was able to complete, but also I was able to focus on the academics. But it was a good balance. I thought I could have a lot of time with friends, going out, but also because I had that desire to go into med, I knew I had to obviously study a bit as well. So
Okay,
I'd say it was a really good holistic experience. Yeah.
good. That dream of med, that desire to get into medicine, when did that start off for you?
Oh, that's a really good question.
It'd be hard to pick a time.
Yeah, it's a really tough question because I remember very early on that I was interested really in the human body and the whole health sciences and so on. But I think it really struck to me that I wanted to complete med when I chose my subjects. And so once I completed certain subjects, which I'm sure we'll go into, I did biology, physical education.
Okay.
I think I had an interest in the sciences, and I was steering more towards health already. So I already had that as an option as my domain, either medicine, dentistry, physiotherapy,
Awesome.
something around there. But I think over the last 2 years and during those VC years, I tried to just narrow down to why medicine. And to me, I think it was a few reasons. Obviously, one's that medicine's a privilege to be able to provide so much back to the community, and it's one of those occupations that's very directly based into the community. It's something that affects individuals, and you can witness the impacts that they have in their lives. And so that was something that really was deep to me, I felt, and why I wanted to complete medicine. But also, medicine is a very academically challenging subject and degree. And so it's something that me as someone, I would love to continue to learn. I wanted to continue to pursue it because I knew that I'll always be learning during my whole occupation. So there was several reasons why, and I finally was able to narrow it down. But to me, it was my base of just my love for sciences, health, anatomy. And then from then on, I knew that it was going to be medicine when comparing with the other health occupations. So,
Awesome. Was there anything else that you considered along the way? Obviously, that's a very comprehensive set of things to contribute to that desire for medicine. But was there anything else that you considered, both from the perspective of, maybe the thought didn't run through your head, but maybe I didn't get into medicine, or maybe I might just have another interest. Maybe it's not for me. Was there anything else that?
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, I knew that if I didn't get into medicine, there'd be so many other opportunities, which equally were as valuable to me at the time. And so one of them was really physiotherapy.
Okay.
And that's, I guess, when I completed physical education, and I love that subject a lot. And so as a result, I remember when completing it, it struck to me that I love anything about the human body, movement, anything related to that. So I felt like physiotherapy was my best alternative as a choice, but also dentistry as well, I think was another one. So I said those are the other ones I was also leaning towards as potential choices. But
So very health focused.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a bit of a pattern there.
A bit of a pattern.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm interested in, before we dive into a little bit more holistically, Year 12, just on what you were talking about there. So you took a particular interest in PE in the health sense. Is looking forward from now, is sports medicine something that you're potentially thinking about in the long term?
Yeah, definitely, exactly. Obviously, it's a bit early to decide what I want to specialize or go into because I'm just a first year.
Of course.
And I need a lot more experience. But I always thought potentially maybe somewhere around orthopedics as a potential option. Just because anything to do movement, joints, anything like sports medicine and working in that field is it's a big interest to me because I know that it's something that's as again, like a little foundation, it's something that I want to continue doing, hopefully in the future. So yeah,
it's very exciting. Well, I'm sure that we will, as the years go on, you'll start.
Yeah, and also I'm sure maybe there might chances I might change depending on my placements and so on in the future. But yeah,
well, it's one of the privileges of medicine that you have so much scope.
Exactly, so many options.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that introduction.
Yeah.
So, as far as how university's gone so far, for a lot of people watching this, they'll either just be picking their subjects or still be into school, and maybe they're on the other side of school. But when you're on one side of school, it sort of seems like another world university. Like it's on the other side of the ATAR, on the other side of all your exams. So, can you give a bit of insight into how uni's gone so far? How's the transition been from high school into university, and how's medicine going?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I have this funny saying I say to my friends, like, I remember during year 12, I was always like, oh, the grass will always be green on the other side,
Yep.
Once you're over that hurdle of ATAR and exams. And it really is. Like, I find that once you're in university, it's completely different. It's a whole new experience of independence, I'd say. So, like, living in Bendigo, I have to obviously move in to Monash Clayton. So I live on res.
Yeah, that's a whole nother experience.
Exactly, a whole nother experience. And it's a bit of a shock, honestly, but it's a great opportunity for me to mature and, again, live that independent lifestyle where I look after myself and I'm able to have the freedom to, do things as I want, but also to, I say just have that responsibility and accountability to looking after myself. And so in that sense, I find that's why uni is so different, because you have so many more opportunities to do many different groups and co-curriculums, to go out with friends, generally just, in general, you have so many opportunities to do so many things. I feel like in university, that's the beauty of it, because high school for many students I find can be quite restrictive, especially the way way you're like taught and so on. Everything's very set in a set pace, like, okay, you're completing this, and this, and so on. But in uni, it's very more so independent based. Like, you have to do it on yourself, basically, and how you want to complete the course. So I feel like that's why uni is it's a unique opportunity for a lot of students, especially in year 12, once they've completed their ATAR and BCE, to kind of broaden as to what they'd like to come do, I guess, in the future. So
Oh, that's a great insight into you. I've certainly found that as well in terms of how much independence you have.
Exactly.
There's two sides to that. There's the good side of it.
Yeah.
It's where you do have the opportunity to go out with friends, and you certainly have more. It sort of feels like more agency over what you can do. I feel like school gives you a lot of, in a very good way, gives you a lot of those opportunities in emails and kind of gives it to you on a platter. But uni, you're seeking it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
But there's a bit more scope too. On the other side of that, though, that there is the aspect where people aren't really checking up on you to check if you've done the lectures as much, or to check if you've done the book work, whereas in school you've got teachers chasing you up. And one of the reflections that I've had, having been a year and a half into uni now, is that you kind of take it for granted, having someone chase you up on and keeping you accountable on that.
Yeah.
And when you're in school, it's when you're in university rather, it's kind of part of your responsibility to find people that are going to do that for you as well, and take that initiative too. So having the independence that you have with your residency as well, I think is going to be super duper helpful for you in the next few years, because you've got that accountability for yourself. You've got that independence. How is res going? How has it been going into a place by yourself?
I have to say, like, I agree with what you said, and like for me, res, like, it's definitely a huge shock, but again, I think it pushed me to be more independent and being more accountable, I guess, with myself.
Awesome.
And what you brought up before about obviously being in uni, you're taught to become more accountable, and there's no one to really check up on you as there is in high school and so on. And I think in that sense, it is good. It's a good way for us as like young adolescents to mature and to take that accountability to look after ourselves. And it might be a bit of a worry for many, but I find it's like I said, an excellent opportunity. And for me, I've been quite lucky by living in residency. I've had that push already, and it will set me up on hopefully in the future for like placements and so on, where again, that value, that how do I just describe it? That skill, I guess you could say, the idea of being accountable and being responsible for yourself,
Absolutely.
it's so vital in like the workplace and so on, and it's something that you need to learn obviously in the future. So it's best, I guess, take that opportunity and learn it in uni. So yeah,
it's very exciting. In terms of your friendship group as well, has residency been a really good place for you to make friends alongside the course too?
100%. Like in my hall, I live in Turner Hall.
Okay.
I have 2 other friends there in medicine as well.
Awesome.
And already, like from the get-go, I was able to build like a really good connection and relationship with them. And throughout the year, we've been able to like navigate and deal with, you know, obviously some tough assignments and group things and all that, but also just like have fun and enjoy the time we have with ourselves and have a balance, I guess, with obviously completing you know, a course and so on, but also like having time to do things together and to make other friends in our course and so on. So I was really lucky, I'd say, to have met some of those people. Because again, going into residency, you find that you might not have a support system initially, and it is quite, you do quite worry about it a bit because, you know, you're away from family, away from parents and friends and so on. But I was really lucky that I was able to build that up on the start of the year. And my residency, they were a really great support system. They always provide me like support, help with food, for example. They can come and help. But I think it was really important that I was able to make friends immediately from the get-go, who we can rely with each other in times where it might be tough and so on. So yeah, I was really lucky in that instance.
Outstanding. How has it been being away from family and friends back home?
Yeah, I'd say like obviously it is quite tough in the instance where like being away from them, you don't get to enjoy their comfort and support that you're always given, I guess, in like high school and last year and so on. And I remember maybe you take that for granted, and when you're living on res, you realize how much you value your family. And so for me, it has been quite tough, but I do like try to frequently check up on them. So for me, like I told my parents, I go every week or so at least, or fortnightly back home. And yeah, I generally like to do like frequent calls every day. So like I just find at least 10 minutes of my day to call my parents, to call my like brother, things like that. I think that's really important to have that consistent system. Just I'm always in touch with them, and I can always reach out to them whenever I need. But I say like in that sense, again, I try and think of it in a positive mindset in which at one point we all have to kind of mature and to like look after ourselves, like I said, and times we might not be with our family as much in the future. So I guess like it's really important to again always have consistent checkups and make sure, just know that they're always there for you, basically. So
yeah. It's a good encouragement for all of us though to be staying in touch with our family. Like 100%. I think in the busyness of life, it's very easy to just take what we have for granted, and that's an awesome lesson. Even if we're not away from home, to just be checking up on each other and enjoying the privilege that it is to live at home and you know, help with dinner and things like that.
So exactly, like it's like when I ever go home, it feels like you can just wind down and just like relax from all the tension and stuff of uni, because it does happen where everything, being in university, especially being on residency, a lot of stuff builds up, and so it's just great to just like, kind of leave that environment and just take time to be with family. And for me, like again, like I said, I took it for granted maybe like last year and time in high school, but I value it so much more, and that's where like I know going onwards how valuable it is to like spend time with family and, you know, be with them as much as you can. So yeah,
awesome, good. I'm curious though, does it feel like, I don't personally live on res, but does it feel like having living on res that you almost, how do I phrase it, you can't really get away from uni because you're on campus? Does it ever feel like that? I sort of had that discussion with a few friends coming out of high school. They were going to live on res. They're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to feel like I can get away from class. Like I go back and study, and then I go to class, and then I go back and study. Does it feel a bit like that, or is it more kind of I'm going back to my own little home?
No, I can definitely get what your friends are saying in terms of like that always being stuck in that university environment. Because to me, it is kind of true. Because like, for example, like I remember at the start of the year, I had a lot of friends in uni and stuff, and they always came to like my hall and stuff, and so I never got to like separate my idea of like my mini home to university. But I've learned over the year that like, I've gotten better at it now, and I've tried to acclimatize, I guess you could say, my own like little room as my home. So obviously it is better, but I definitely get that living on residency, you just know it's hard to separate the idea of university, I guess, and a home. And I realize it's quite important to separate those two, just so that, again, like I said before, you can wind down from everything associated with the university, friends, any work, and just your own family time and so on. So I think it's good to try to do that, but you can definitely separate the two where you're living on residency. It's just, you need to kind of actively pursue that. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. You've given a great amount of insight into uni, actually. Overall, like, you feel like it's a positive thing for you so far? Uni's been a good transition?
100%. I think, again, I feel like I'm very grateful and lucky. Obviously, the start of the year, which I was able to make a lot of friends who I can trust and like who are long-term friends I know and who are genuine. But also the support system of the university and my residency. And I think having that as well, and obviously my family, my family's always providing me like food, and they're always coming to check up on me. Like that's like, I think I've been very grateful to have a lot of support systems, I guess, and that helped make the transition from school to uni quite easy. And obviously, I had quite a few friends from school actually who also went to Monash, who were also in medicine as well, and so that also made it very easy to transition as well for me. And I'm very lucky for that, let's say.
Okay.
So that's why I'm generally, my whole experience so far has been really good generally. So yeah.
Are you still spending time with some of those friends that you've had from high school?
To be honest, I do try and catch up as much as I can, but I think with just like the whole busyness of university and so on, I've been spending less time with them. But obviously, I think it's really important to try to maintain those relationships. And for my friends and myself, we both know like there are times we're so busy and we can't meet with each other as much as we did in high school. But having that knowledge, we're both mature enough, and we're all very mature to be able to just like still make the effort to try to meet up every now and then.
Awesome.
So still, I'd say I'm maintaining my relationships, from high school, which I'm really grateful again for. So
it's part of growing up as well that you're naturally going to go and make new friends. And one of the fears in high school is that you might feel the expectation to keep being friends with those people, and then it's like this, but I kind of have this new friendship group now that, and then part of the learning in the first year and also of uni is going, well, it's okay to go and make new friends. It doesn't mean that I disregard this friendship. It doesn't mean that we can't be friends or hang out. It's a new space. We're growing up, we're adults now, and we can grow into a new friendship group, a new space.
100%. I feel like if there's that clear communication between both parties in that instance, then I'm sure like you can still maintain those friendships, but like you said, make new friends in uni. Because I feel like in high school, again, we're always all together. But as we go to uni, like our paths quite like separate or divert. And that's just a natural course that happens to every single person I find who goes from school to uni. And it's like something you just have to embrace, I guess. So I'd say it's a way of just tackling and communicating with your high school friends or what's the best course of action of how to maintain your friendship and how to meet up every now and then. But also just accept that, look, you may not be with them as much, but you can still maintain that friendship.
I've really noticed with some of my high school friends that you realize a lot of the relationships that you value the most or are the strongest are the ones that persist after high school. Sort of out of once the circumstance of high school is removed, that you've got these really good friends. There's maybe even the ones that you didn't sort of expect or hang out with the most, the ones that you continue to be friends with. And that's just such a wonderful part of growing up as well, is how those relationships flourish in a new space as well, even if they're not in your class or your course or even you're living with you in residency. You have that opportunity for those relationships to flourish.
Yeah, exactly. And I have like one close friend. I'm very lucky. Like we were stuck through everything basically since the start of high school, and he's in med with me. He's not in the same residency, but we may not be in the same friendship groups, but like again, we've made sure to maintain our friendships and to keep close regardless for everything. And I think, like you said, that's how you know the friendship's very genuine and long term, which something you just have to appreciate more, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Let's tackle a little bit your high school experience. We talked a lot about your uni and how transitions happened. So what did you get up to in high school? I'm sure it was a lot from the discussion that we had before. But tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I felt going into high school, I remember thinking, I want to go in without no regrets. I want to go into high school, try and get rid of everything, and just making sure that I'm satisfied with my whole experience. And so with me, my high school experience basically tells me completing a variety of curriculums. So I try to do some in music, a bit of sports, a bit of public speaking and so on, and some leadership roles. And I guess in doing so, I had to find that balance with my academics and how to obviously maintain friendships, going out, completing those co-curriculums, but also focusing on academics. And so for me, I'd say, just to describe my whole like high school experience, it's one of balance, I'd say. Balance is such a key, vital aspect that I find that a lot of students may not realize, but it's something that's so achievable. You have to actively kind of pursue and have discipline in. And so for me, that's what I would consider to be the whole general experience of high school. But yeah.
Okay. I would really want to delve into the theme of balance a little bit more later.
Yeah.
I think you've undercut a few things in that description, though.
Yeah.
In your dabbling of leadership roles, you were school captain.
Yeah, yeah.
In your success in your studies, clearly you've got into medicine, so you've done exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And we're talking like multiple instruments, multiple sports.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot on your plate.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, it's all about balance is, I'm sure in retrospect, it's much easier to say than at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, how on earth did you get through it all? What did sort of the day-to-day look like of your year 12 with all of that busyness going on?
100%. I think in year 12, I went in the mindset, again, not to have any regrets leaving high school, regardless of whether I go into medicine or not. I feel like I wanted to make sure that my year 12 experience was something that I'm appreciative that I did everything I could. But like I said, with the balance, I feel like I saw it in a sense that, for example, when I do want to focus on my schoolwork and academics, I can completely focus on it. But I know there are times you can't be doing that, I guess, 100% of the time. Like, you need your breaks, you need time to step out of that environment of like school and work. And so those are the opportunities I use to dabble in other things. So like, one thing, for example, is my school captaincy. When going into it the year before, I was contemplating, should I really do this? Will it affect my chance of getting to medicine? Or like, it's a lot of work. And it was so much work. But I'm so grateful I took the opportunity because it forced me to take a break from just like year 12 in VCE. And I know a lot of students, especially those who want to go for like medicine and so on, they're too stuck in just like, studying. But I really think it's so important to just force yourself to have a break, not only for yourself mentally, but physically as well. And I think that's why with my school captaincy, there were so many times where we had speeches to write, we had like so many meetings to attend, so many extracurricular things we had to do. And there are times, not going to lie, like, it annoyed me, obviously, because I'm like, how am I going to balance this? Like, it's like, even myself, I'm like, this is not possible. But I guess forcing yourself to do those things, you realize how important it is, because if you were to just continue studying, you'd obviously burn out. And I find that's like a phenomenon I guess many students go through. And so going through my school captaincy, doing those speeches, doing those extra meetings and so on, gave me a break. And I try to look at it into that mindset of it being a break for me to then come back to then studies and then focus on it. And it forces you really to be very productive, I guess, in your studies, because you know you have a restricted amount of time. And so it's best to complete your work, but then also have some break and have some time with friends, with family, and also with your extracurriculars. So I know it's like you said, it's easier said than done. Like, and I'll be honest, there are times where like I was confused. I'm like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to balance it? But I think it's just you have to trust yourself. You have to trust yourself that, look, you can get it. You can complete the work. You're able to get to the score or whatever you like. But to do so, you need to make sure you have a balance. And that balance is doing hobbies and so on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like school captaincy or some like elite sport or anything. It can simply just be like a hobby, or even just going out for frequent walks, things like that. Anything to have a break from studying, I find is so important. So I guess that's like the general entail of my balance. But it's so tough to really explain what's the best way, because for every person it's quite different. And I think it's something that each person needs to find for themselves on how they think they can tackle it, but also how they can then trust themselves throughout the whole course of the year. So yeah.
Okay. I'm keen to dissect some of those ideas.
Yeah.
Soon. The initial phase that you spoke about, how walking into year 12, you went, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this. There's all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because your school captaincy you would have had announced sort of late. Year before.
Yeah, year before. Yeah.
Okay, so throughout that school holidays, when you got your pre-year 12 work, you're on the back of a 3-4 in year 11 as well. You completed one subject. Where did it sort of all of the goal setting happen? How did you go about going, this is what I'm going to do this year, this is how I'm going to lay out my year? What did that look like for you?
I'd say it was like, I had this period in like that December, January period where I was contemplating like, okay, how am I going to break down this year?
Cool.
And the one thing I'm so grateful for is my co-captain, my friend, she is very much as proactive as me. And so with her, we knew that this role would be really tough, and we both like really want to do well, and we're very strong in academics. So it was something that we made sure to always complete in an organized like fashion. So at the start of the year, we made sure, okay, we have deadlines for this speech, we have deadlines for this assignment, deadlines for this meeting, and we're going to complete them. And the thing I'm so grateful with for her is we kept each other accountable, and having that person to keep you on track is so helpful, because there are times where you might like steer away from it because simply you just don't want to do it or you don't want to complete it. But in terms of school captaincy, that was so vital for me. I think that was I was like a perfect partner for me to then like bounce off with ideas, but also complete our things. Like I remember we have like a start of term and end of term speeches. And so for example, during the end of term speeches, we had like a deadline, let's say middle of the term, we should have completed the speech, and then we complete other assignments and things like later onwards, anything revolving around the speech. And so doing that every single term, we met up so frequently and had those deadlines. It was like, I was kind of proud of us. I'm like, I can't believe we're actually able to stick to those deadlines, because it's so hard in year 12.
Yes, it is.
It's so hard. But I think, like I said, we had that whole conversation at the very start of the year, December, January. And for me personally, like obviously doing other co-currics and stuff, the way I try to like think about it, again, I try to think in a more like optimistic mindset and a more of a positive outlook, saying, look, at the end of the day, if I don't get into the course I don't want to, it's totally fine. There's so many other alternative pathways and so many pathways for you to go through. But it's in a sense that you want to have a balance. You really want to look after your mental and physical health. And I think that's something that a lot of year 12s disregard. But I feel like at the end of the day, your mental and physical health is much more important than a simple score that you get at the end of the year. So that's the way I try to look at it. And obviously, if I can get, look after my mental and physical health, but also get the scores I want and so on, then it's an additional bonus. But to me, my mental and physical health was my main priority over my like ATAR and like UCAT and so on. So I'd say that's how I try to like prioritize my stuff, and that's why I force myself to complete those extracurriculars and like school captaincy and so on.
Okay. What were some practical things that you actually put in place to take care of that physical, mental health?
Yeah, like for physical health, obviously, again, that's why I completed a few sporting curriculums. So I was a part of my school's running club. I was also part of my school's like badminton club and soccer team. And I guess that's my way of looking after my physical health. And I try to go gym and stuff like that. It's just a great break from school. In terms of my mental health, throughout my year, I try to go into journaling. And I think journaling was really helpful because it allowed me to become more self-reflective and obviously to be more appreciative of where I am, especially in year 12. And I think that was something I personally did to myself, and that was something I found so beneficial. And I really encourage a lot of year 12 students to take that up as maybe a potential way to look after their mental health. But again, I'm so lucky again with my like support system. I had really close friends, family, and the school was also really supportive of me. And they knew like there are times where it could be tough just balancing everything. But yeah, so that in terms of practicality, that was the way I like dealt with my mental health. But personally, intrinsically me, it was just journaling and having those self-reflection moments. But also with my like support system as well. So,
okay. Where did you start that journaling practice? Was that from the start of year 12?
Yeah, so I tried, not necessarily year 12, I tried that in start of year 11. So start of my VC journey, I think that's when I started. And I was very skeptical. I'm like I remember a friend of mine told me they were doing it. I was like, does it actually work? Like, are you actually getting anything out of it? But I knew, I was like, why not try? It doesn't hurt to try. And look, if it's not for me, it's not for me. And I'm not saying it works for every single person.
And you had a crack at it.
Yeah, just have a crack at it, see how it goes. And so that's why I tried at year 11. I was a bit inconsistent actually in year 11, but I definitely could tell there were benefits to it. But because of those benefits, I was like, in year 12, I was very consistent with it. I can't emphasize how important it actually was to me. So that's something I definitely recommend, any year 12 students who are looking for any way to look after their mental health, just like have a crack at it and have a try of journaling, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay. The journaling practice itself, what was kind of, with the risk of being not too private with this, but in your reflections, was it a lot of oh, today my study habits were this way, or my school day was like this? Or was it more kind of, this is how I was feeling through this space? Was it a bit more self-reflective on the emotional side, or the more kind of self-driven academic side?
Yeah.
If that kind of makes
sense. Yeah, that makes sense. For me, it was more the emotional side.
Okay.
Because I found that at that time, my emotional side at the time influenced how I was academically driven. So I knew that if I could focus on how I'm feeling emotionally, that would be a reflection of how I'm going to be academically driven and so on. And so for me, like, if there were times where like it was just really stressful, or I found that everything was piling up, it was just the perfect time to just journal about it. But obviously it doesn't have to be like in like those negative situations, but also just like in those times of positive moments. Like I had many times I can just appreciate or be grateful for where I am. And so I think it's really good to just take time and just write about it. And being mindful about these instances, it makes you appreciate the whole journey of year 12. And it makes you realize at the end of the day, like, we only have one more year of high school, so why not make it your best year? And I try to see it in that sense. And I felt like by me like looking at it in that perspective and journaling about it, that then led to my academics. Like that led to it being a reflection of academics, I found. And it was a really clear correlation for me, to be honest. I'm not sure if it is for everyone, but for me, like, I found if I was more appreciative, grateful, and if I was really more in tune with my emotions at the time, like personally, that has a reflection of how academically driven I was and how motivated I was to then complete the work or to get the work done. So yeah.
Amazing. Sounds like a practice that a lot of us should adopt. And I think what's really incredible about you sharing that is in a position not only where you are in a position of responsibility as a school captain, people from all ages are looking up to you to pretty much be switched on all the time and do everything pretty much perfectly.
Yeah, exactly.
Teachers and the students included, but also just being a young guy that's, you know, we kind of have this tendency to not be terribly emotionally maybe reflective, I think is a bit of a stereotype for young guys. And for you to share that with all of us and go, hey, I was actually found so much benefit in myself because I was emotionally reflective is really special. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm super, super glad that it was beneficial for your studies as well.
Exactly.
So tell me a bit about your studies. What subjects, you mentioned PE and biology before, but tell me a bit about the subject landscape and particularly the year 11, 3, 4 as well, because I'm interested to hear about that experience.
Definitely, yeah. So in year 11, I was quite lucky. I was able to do actually 2 subjects. So PE 3, 4 and biology 3, 4. I completed those 2 in year 11. And then in year 12, I had 4 subjects. I had French 3, 4, English language, chemistry, and then maths methods.
Okay.
So that was generally the scheme of the 6 subjects I was completing. For me, year 11, if we can go into year 11, 3, 4 subjects. For biology, I was really lucky to actually get an opportunity to complete it because they have like the system where if your grades are good enough to a certain extent, you can complete biology. And so I completed with a lot of friends of mine. And PE was again, like I completed a subject called sports science in year 10. And I had a similar scheme where if you got a certain grade or so, you could then go into 3, 4 immediately. And so I completed those 2 from that.
What's the experience of doing 2, 3, 4s though? I think the vast majority of students doing a 3, 4 subjects. Hence my question was a bit misdirected, but a lot of students will do 1, 3, 4 subject if they're allowed. Yeah. What was it like doing 2?
Yeah, exactly. 2 was very weird, but it was also like, I told myself like, if I can do 2 right now and if I can balance this, then I know in year 12, like I can balance 4 because it's not necessarily the number that matters. It's more so if you can balance one and the other, or like 6, for example, together. And so when I was completing year 11, it was more like prioritization of certain subjects. So like, obviously with my 3, 4s, I prioritized those 2 more than my 1, 2s. And obviously throughout the year, I had a bit of a bias, not gonna lie, because with physical education, I enjoyed it much more than bio, but just by a bit. Just by a bit. Just not with my biology teacher hearing this, but it's fine. But yeah, I enjoyed it a bit more, and so obviously I focused more on that subject as well, and I enjoyed it. But in terms of balance, I think it's tough to explain, but I feel like I can just sum it up as in, prioritization of those 3, 4 subjects, but understanding that there's so many SACs you're gonna have to complete, especially for the 2 subjects. And again, you have to realize that if one SAC you may not complete as well, it's not the be all end all. It's more so you just have to continue going on forwards. And it's like, for both subjects, I try to like maintain a consistent amount of effort for all SACs and not try to prioritize one subject over the other. But like I said, I did have a bit of a bias, but I'd say for me it was very consistent, like in terms of how much effort I put into both. And my 1, 2 like teachers, they understood as well. Like I was very lucky where they understood where I was coming from, and they taught me to really learn the foundations that are really important for year 12, and maybe for some parts of year 11, 1, 2 that aren't as important, or topics that aren't as important, I can like skim through just so that I can focus more on the 3, 4 subjects. So yeah.
Okay. That's one of the special things that I noticed as well in my year 11 and 12 experience is that as you pass from your year 10 and move into year 11 and 12, the relationship that you have with your teachers becomes a lot more adult.
Yeah.
They treat you much more maturely and go, hey, like if you've got a 3-4 SAC, I totally understand you need to work on that.
Yeah.
Spend some time doing your revision. Let's talk about how we can equip you with some study habits. Let's check in if you're actually doing okay. And it's one of the great things about having some teacher support. As we were talking about at the start, it's something that you kind of take for granted as you move into uni, because you don't have someone checking up on you all the time. And it's super special, and it was certainly a big part of my success. The relationship that the one that stands out to me immediately was my relationship with my English teacher, because she was constantly checking up on me, and goodness, I gave her way too many essays. It was a bit comedic towards the end, but I'm incredibly grateful for her support, and I'm sure that you could say the same about many of your teachers as well, as even in that year 11 period when you're like, I have no idea what this 3-4 thing is. I'm trying this new subject. So
yeah, like I 100% agree. I think when you like transfer from year 10 to year 11 and 12, you become more you develop a more personal relationship with your teacher, and I think it's because they understand how important this period of your life is. And they genuinely want the best for you.
Yes.
And I find that like from like year 7 to 10, they see you obviously like as a student and so on, but like it feels like it's a more adult-like from year 11 to 12, because they know that you've matured to a sense where like at this point they know that whatever you're completing now, it affects your life because of the VC and the whole system. And so that's why, again, I agree. I'm so appreciative for my teachers. And I think I had, for example, I think it was my biology 3-4 teacher and PE one as well. They were so supportive during the whole process, and I think they really understood how like it's not just like a academic journey, but it's also like a really mental and emotional journey as well, completing 3-4s in VC, because they know how much it affects your future life and so on. And that's why like they know when to not just focus more so on about your academics, like have you completed your assignments, are you ready for your SAT, but more so just checking up on you, like saying, how are you feeling okay, how are you balancing everything? And that's something that's so unique about that relationship between a teacher and a student in year 11 and 12 compared to, let's say, in year 7. Like it's something that a lot of us take for granted, especially when you come into uni as well. It's so much more different. So yeah,
they take tremendous joy in your success.
Exactly.
One of the things I notice is that when you do really well in your SAC, and after you leave your VC exam at the very end, like the teachers go, like, how'd you go?
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't see it either.
Yeah,
like how'd it go?
It's so good. Yeah,
it's good. It's a real pleasure of school to have that relationship. And I would encourage any student starting VCE or currently in VCE to really invest that time. You know, stay back in class, every so often, and just check in with your teacher and get that extra little bit of feedback. Because it's those little wins along the way that do develop that relationship, and I think are pretty instrumental to VCE success in general. What led you to those subjects specifically? One of the challenges with picking subjects is achieving a balance between what do I enjoy and what is going to benefit me the most. How did you weigh up those things?
I think for me, obviously, there's a bit of enjoyment in certain subjects, but
PE more so than
but it also depends on, I feel like, the teachers. I found that I had certain teachers who would encourage me more or who pushed me more forward to do certain subjects. And to me, it showed that they had a sense of faith, I guess, in me. And they really wanted me, like they wanted the best for me, it seemed. And so obviously, for me, that part kind of influenced me to choose my subjects. Obviously, my enjoyment of the subject as well. But I think being realistic, scaling as well. Scaling does play an influence on how you want to complete a subject or not, and whether you can complete the subject in year 11 or 12. For me, the reason I always chose, to be honest, like PE was never on my radar actually.
Okay.
It was never on my radar like from year 9 and 10. I was never thinking, oh, I'm going to do this subject. But I think it's after year 10, my teacher, she really wanted me to complete PE. She's like, this is the perfect subject for you. And she sees me being successful in the subject. And I'm so glad I took her on advice because I was lucky enough I was. And so that's why I feel like that influence, and they know you best as well. That ability for them to give that advice was really important for me to then choose my subjects. But I say obviously the like scaling as well, though, it does like intrinsically and subconsciously it does influence you as well. I feel like that's nothing wrong with it. I feel like it's something that every student will go on and think about, but obviously it shouldn't be your main goal. It's more so like an additional benefit, you could say. But to me, I guess when I was choosing my subjects, I chose, for example, French. Obviously,
big scale.
exactly. It's a pretty big scale up, and it was a big influence on why I chose it. Obviously, I love the subject, and my teacher was pushing me forward as well. But I chose that over certain other subjects again because of the scaling, even though my enjoyment may have been very similar to another subject. So yeah.
For a student who's having a think about, what?
Do you want to just ask that question again? Because it was, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Do you want to have a sip of water?
Yeah, that's all good.
I'm a touch sick as well. I'm a bit croaky.
Yeah.
For a student who's considering picking their own subjects and actually tackling that moment where you go, I'm going to lay out these subjects for the next 2 years, because in year 10, August, September-ish, I think, is when you're approximately going to be picking your subjects. So what sort of advice would you give to a student who's taking on that subject selection? Keeping in mind, you had medicine in mind, which is a highly academic and a very high scoring course. What sort of advice would you give for a student who's maybe not interested in being in that very, very like pointy end of the ATAR, but just is looking for a really enjoyable VC experience as well?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's simple as the fact that just do subjects that you genuinely are interested in and that you enjoy. And I find that if you do subjects that you do genuinely want to, like you find interesting, your results will be a reflection of that. And so to me, I remember for me in year 10, I try to think, obviously again, several factors were played into it, but my main factor was whether I find interest in the subject. And so the advice I generally would give is I find that year 10 students, they should choose them based on what they enjoy. And hopefully another factor is if they could maybe talk to the teachers, talk to maybe past students who completed the subject, and really get advice on whether they think the subject's for them. Because from like the first hand look at it might be a really good subject, but as you go into it, it might not actually be what you want to do. So I think, that's been generally my main advice is, one, just complete subjects that you find interesting, and again, that'll be a reflection of your scores and your results. But also do get advice from teachers and other students, just so you have a really good grasp of the actual subject itself, and you know what you're going into basically. And if you know what you're going into and you find interest in it, then that's a perfect opportunity to then complete that subject. But I'd say those would be the two main pieces of advice I'd give.
Those discussions that you mentioned with other students who have already done the subjects, did you have any of those that you reflect on and found significant in your subject selection?
I would say I have an older brother, and he completed French as well.
Okay.
And so I had that discussion with him about whether to complete French or not. And to be honest, he was like, iffy about it. He's like, oh, do you really want to do French and stuff?
You probably see him doing hours of
I did hours of preparation. Not gonna lie, I was a bit hesitant, but then I asked him genuinely why did you choose it, and what were your reasonings? And it seemed very similar to what I was saying just then. He was just interested in the subject. He was curious about how this would entail and whether this could be a skill or something that he could take on in the future. And so from listening to that, having that conversation, I became quite curious as into, maybe this is something that not only do I just learn in last year or in high school, but something I can then take on in the future as like a skill, as in a language I can pursue in the future as well. But also just because I found interest in it as well. So from that, I had that conversation with him about French. I know many friends I had, like older ones I had talking about biology as well. And again, I think that's just because having that conversation, I was curious about, so what do you actually go into? And it's just very similar to my own interest, which I already said, which is like the health and anatomy side of things. And there was a very good link towards the two. And so that's again why I decided to steer towards biology. In terms of physical education, I'd say it was my teachers actually. Like I said, my teachers really pushed me to do PE, and they said, this is the one for you.
Awesome.
You should do it. And so having that encouragement, it really influenced me to complete the subject. And I realized the beauty of PE and biology, they go hand in hand. There's a lot of things that linked to each other. So when I completed year 11, they kind of complemented really well. And so I think that also made my journey in completing the two much more easier as well. Yeah.
The importance of having discussions with multiple people, I think, as well came up in listening to that. Because if you listen to just one person's opinion of a subject, there's a few factors that might play into that. Then, the teacher that they had might not have had a particularly good experience with that teacher. They maybe just didn't enjoy the subject very much. Or on the flip side, maybe the first person you speak to about biology, about PE, about whatever subject you're taking on had just the best experience.
Yeah, it's true.
So having a diversity of opinions and actually reaching out to teachers and past students and current students alike, you're in the same school grounds as a lot of year 12s.
Yeah.
So being able to walk up to one of them and go, hey, like, tell me about how biology's going.
Yeah.
Like you're deep in the unit about all the immunology stuff, how you do, there you go. So having a diverse conversation, having some diverse opinions on subject selection, I think super important. It was super important for me as well in actually figuring out where I wanted to go with my subjects too.
Yeah, like I think it's by having that diversity of opinions, again, there's not a certain bias that you'll be influenced by, which I think is really important. And I think, like I said, having a really good in-depth grasp of the actual subject and getting that opinions of what other people think. But also from the teachers, I feel like teachers, they can have that bias, but they know the best for you, and they will give you a very logistical understanding of what you'll be completing in the course and in the subject. And for me, that's why I think having that in-depth grasp of it hopefully will then give students the best idea of whether this subject is for them or maybe not. So yeah, I think diversity of opinions are very important.
Did your subjects change at all in the period of BCE? Or did you stick with the same ones that you chose?
Yeah, this is a very good question because they did not change.
Okay.
But there was a period that was very, very close to changing. It was actually, I'd say, it was between end of year 11 and start of year 12. So I completed my subject year 11 but I had my French exam.
Okay.
It wasn't the greatest. It was a barely passed. But and so I was contemplating, is this really worth it for me to do next year? And there was a lot of effort. I remember a lot in year 11. I was thinking 3-4 obviously is going to be a big step up. Like, can I really complete it? And so between year 11 and 12, so like the December-January stage, where you can still change your subjects, I was going back and forth whether to choose further mathematics 3-4 or French. And so it was that back and forth I wasn't too sure about. And the way I tackled it, to be honest, was, again, it was similar grasp as to what I did in year 10. I just went to several students, went to teachers, try to get an understanding of their subject, try to get advice from my careers. I don't know if it's careers, but like my year 12 counselor, and asking, is it beneficial? Is it okay if I then skip 1-2 further and go to 3-4? Is that really a good idea? And trying to get their advice. And I guess it was a very like muddy point at that point because I wasn't sure, should I do French? Should I not? Like, the scaling is good, but also like it's a lot of effort, and it's like in terms of prioritization, I knew that French wasn't going to be in my like main focus, I'd say. But I think I stuck with French, and the reason I did it was I had a really good talk with my French teacher. She was like, you can not put that much effort into French, it's fine, and you might find that it's really tough, but just know, again, why you're doing that subject. If you're doing it out of basic, just curiosity and interest, like I said before, you're going to find it enjoyable and you're going to find it fun. And to me, I that's why I chose French, and I did find it really enjoyable. It's just obviously the assignments and the workload was quite heavy, but I knew that she was a really good support system, and she really looked after me in year 12. And she said to me, look, you keep completing it if you really enjoy it. And obviously she said she'll be there for me in terms of like this heavy workload. And she knew I had a lot of other things outside of school, like academics and so on. And so having her tell that to me, again, the support of the teachers and how impactful they were to me, I think it was a slight edge to then me, okay, just to complete French. And I'm glad I did, because like I realized her impact and her support throughout the whole year was like, if I didn't have that, I don't think I would have wanted to even do French. I wouldn't have even done as well as I did in French. So I think, yeah, that was like a weird moment where like I was contemplating so much whether to change the subject or not. But at the end of the day, I didn't. I changed one. So.
Okay. A great practical and reflection on what we were talking about before, which is that relationship and ongoing support of the teachers, which is excellent. And yeah, for those students that do have that teacher that is supporting them, I'm really excited for them to walk through.
Exactly. Yeah.
I suppose that leads me into the last question I want to ask about your subject, which is, did you have any regrets? Like looking back, were you happy with the subjects that you stuck with?
I'd say overall, like I can't think of any significant regrets that I had in terms of the subjects I chose. Yes, there were certain subjects I'm like, oh, if I didn't do this, maybe I could have done something else. Like methods, for example. I wasn't a big fan of methods. And I was like, obviously throughout the end of the year, I just could not prioritize it. I wasn't a big fan of it. And like, there are times I'm like, by the time I chose something else, and I was contemplating it. But I felt at the time like it wouldn't make a huge difference to me, because there were already certain subjects that I prioritized and loved so much more, and it would have been the exact same. And I'm sure that if I liked a certain subject over methods, I would have already known that in like year 11 or year 10. And so you can see it maybe as a regret, but I don't really picture it like that. It's more so like, oh, I could contemplate, maybe I could have chosen something else. But at the end of the day, I'm still happy about the subjects I chose, and I'm still happy about the way I went with all the subjects. So yeah,
brilliant. It's one of the tricky things with subjects is that you're not gonna love all of them.
Yeah,
it's difficult to love all of them. It really is. Yeah, some really great reflections on subject selection there, and it leads me nicely into having a bit of a conversation around your study habits for each of those subjects.
Yeah,
everyone's going to study differently.
Yeah,
and I'm really interested to hear about your unique approach to BCE as a whole.
Yeah,
and then also some specific subject styles of studying.
Yeah, exactly. Just like going into, I guess, as a whole, like how I studied. Generally, to me, like, again, I'll sum it up as consistency is key. That's the way I saw it as. So, generally, I'll give you like a rundown of my day, I guess. So, obviously, had school and so on. Had quite a lot of study periods because I did 4 subjects.
Of course, so you'd have twice as many.
I had twice as many, so it was really good. To be honest, they weren't always productive because with friends being there,
they can't always be productive.
Can't always be productive. So, but during those times I try to complete all my homework, any assignments, anything like that. And then generally I have my extracurriculars, come back home and so on. Maybe come back around, let's say, 6-7 o'clock. And I try to smash up maybe an hour and a half. And in that time, I try to study and ahead of what my school's learning. And in doing so, it gives me a perfect amount of time for me to reconsolidate everything I'm learning as I'm going to be doing in year 12, in class, I'm sorry. So to me, my whole idea was just being consistent and doing a bit of work for the whole year. Like maybe I'd say maybe 2-3 hours a day, outside of just school, 2-3 hours a day. And I'll try to keep ahead of what my school's curriculum, syllabus is. And in doing so, it just gives me enough time for me to actually take in the content, reconsolidate my knowledge, and actually practice. So that was my step, is just every single day, doing bits by bit of new content, just learning it. Obviously, if I had questions, I'd go to my teacher, ask them, try to get as much help and advice from them as well. And another thing was just practice questions. I can't emphasize how how many practice exams I did, how many practice assessments I did. That was my main thing. I was like trying to get as much exposure as I could. And I find that in doing so, that cycle of learning the content by myself just newly, reconsolidating it at class time, completing homework assignments during like my free periods, but then having time to do practice exams and SACs and so on. That constant cycle, I try to do it consistently throughout the whole year. And for me, that worked really well. It was like a really holistic approach of having time to learn the content, having time to deduce questions, having time to maybe ask questions, seek advice. And that cycle was what I try to do like pretty much like the whole year. So that's how I describe my overall study habits. And again, like I can't say like, it's not perfect. It's not like every day it was possible. There will be times where like days you just don't want to study. There'll be days that you just are too busy with other things, like my co-curriculars or captaincy I couldn't do. And that's so normal. I feel a lot of students are too tied upon trying to do it every day as consistent, but consistency is just like trying to make sure you do it every now and then. It doesn't have to be every single day, I find. And so I think it's very normal if students find that they can't complete work every day or like they're too busy with something else. That's so normal. But it's more so just making sure you find the time every now and then to try and complete the work or try and have that habit at least. And in doing so, it doesn't become like a chore. It just becomes, like I said, a habit. And it becomes like innate and a natural thing for you to complete. So, yeah.
And you can give yourself those moments where you can have a rest and not feel too guilty about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Snap back into the consistency.
Yeah, exactly.
Back to it.
Exactly. That's why it's, it's good to obviously, I'd say that in the initial few months it might be quite tough because it will feel like a chore, but then it just feels like a normal like daily habit you just do. And that's something you can get back to quite easily at sign up, right? In terms of subject specific, it's very varied. I know a lot of my STEM subjects, it was that similar process of just completing like questions, completing practice SACs and exams, learning the content beforehand. And that's something I did with like chemistry, biology, methods, for example, those types of subjects. But to just get like a new bit of fresh air, like for French, for example, it was such a unique subject where you can't just do that. You can't expect yourself to be, expecting guaranteed marks or scores. It was a unique subject where it was more so exposure of the language. So what I did was I try to use in my free time where I just want to relax. I listen to French music. I watched a French movie. I was like on the French TV, just like anything like
exposure.
That. It's just
exposure.
Legit, just like exposure.
Cool.
And the more you have of it, the more easier it becomes. And it did become a bit easier. And so for French, it would be more so I'd say exposure of the language and embracing it and trying to, read articles every now and then, listen to some music, things like that. But also just having time to practice your skills and fine-tuning skills and so on was what I completed with French. In terms of English language, it's a bit of a unique subject. It's like you can do practice around it, but I find that consolidation of your knowledge is so important for English language. And being able to do that consistently, I found was really, really important. So I'd say to students, the best advice for English language is, consolidating your meta language, consolidating all the content, being very open to like the media though, because obviously you're told we have to collect media examples. So being very proactive on social media, finding things that interest you, what you want to talk about. Because if you're interested in it, you're more likely to then analyze and talk about it more easily. So anything like that. And also,
I'm not particularly up to speed on how English language actually runs.
Yeah.
So comparing that to general like English, just with a few essays, language analysis, things.
Yeah.
How does the subject tend to run throughout the year?
Yeah. So generally, obviously the exam has 3 sections, like the short answer section, analytical commentary, and essay. So generally with the short answer section, that's something you can practice and you can just get better and better at the more you complete. Before the other 2 sections, it's more skill-based, I'd say. So that one, you can practice, but you need to know how to improve on your skills in writing generally. One component of like the essay, for example, is we call it media examples. So that basically tells you going on social media, finding an example of how language is used, and you just have to analyze it. If it's very intriguing or interesting and something that's out of the ordinary, you decide, how can I analyze it? What is the purpose of why they're writing this or saying this? And so that's where you collect that. For me, throughout the year, I was really consistent. I just like made a huge bank of examples I just collected throughout the year. I chose the ones which I found most interesting in, and then I just analyzed them, kept writing about them, and then I implemented those into my essays, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned in your study habits before was the days when you just don't really feel like studying, and when things come up as well. In the spirit of consistency and the balance that you spoke about as well, what was your approach in those days where maybe just captaincy was the whole afternoon, where after the bell rang, you just had something on that evening and then you had to go home? And how did you approach those kind of the roller coaster of your week and adjusting your study to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think during those moments, it's tough because they're very like unexpected. They just come out of nowhere, and you can't never prepare a plan for something like this. But I guess for me, it's you just have to I try to adapt my study schedules. I try to adapt a lot of my whole like schedules and routines. So for example, if there was one day where, like I said, I had a lot of captaincy, extracurriculars, I was just totally too tired and stuff, I then maybe told myself, okay, I'll catch up with the work on the following weekend or on the following next study period. I'll then obviously put a bit more effort in to try to catch up. But yeah, even it's just where that's not possible, I don't think it's the be or end all. It's fine. It's fine for that to happen because it happens to everyone. It's so normal. But I guess it's more so that you can come back after and try to regain that consistency, I guess. And so as long as you come back to how you were initially, then, and with your studies, then I think you should be fine, because that's how I tackled it the way I did it. And I'm sure that there are times where you just become so tired and you're unable to complete work and anything. But if you can just, again, go back to where you were before, then yeah, that's where I tackled it.
Awesome. How do you remedy the times when you just don't have it in you?
Yeah.
When you feel like it's not going to help you, it's not going to be effective study, and you just need to take a night to have a rest and take care of yourself. We spoke a lot about your mental health practices and how journaling's helped you, but what about the nights when you're just feeling really kind of trashed?
Yeah, like one thing in year 12 I had a really sense of guilt. I guess like something about me is because of the whole captaincy and so on. I felt like I had put myself up at a really high standard, this expectation. And that's something I was struggling with, to be honest, in last year and so on. And I remember there were times when obviously when I couldn't do work and stuff, I forced myself to try to complete it. But I realized throughout the year, me doing that, it was not productive at all. I was not gaining anything. And I resorted to having to just talk to friends, talk to family. I went to my school therapist, try to get help with them, what they thought was the best idea. And it all came down to just giving your body a break and understanding that. And I think that you need to accept that it's totally fine if you can't do work a certain day or you can't complete anything. And you shouldn't have such a high expectation on yourself. And that's something I've learned and I'm getting better at nowadays, especially in university, is to just be more kind to yourself and not have such high expectation. And I think for me personally, it was rooted on the fact that that's how everyone, I guess, around me, saw me. And it's just like an image that's formulated, which isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing, but it's just like, you don't want it to internally affect you, I guess. You don't want it to make it your own personal image and for that to be your whole idealistic person, I guess. So for me, during those times when I just couldn't complete work or anything, initially during the start of the year, I forced myself and I was trying to complete it, but with the help of just again, I think therapy, going to a school therapist and seek out support from friends, that really just helped me really just reflect on, okay, why am I doing this? Is it beneficial? It's not. It's affecting my mental health. And so I think it's just more of an acceptance. I had a certain acceptance stage where I just decided, look, I can't complete work this day. That's totally fine. And I'll get back to it in the next coming few days. And I'm sure everything will be fine. So I guess that's how I tackled it specifically for those types of days.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm sure that you could look back and think, I'm glad I took a few of those days off. And,
yeah, exactly.
And that they were beneficial. It's a very difficult thing to get around that image that you spoke about, having the expectation, whether or not people are saying it to you or just because you feel like you have that expectation to always be perfect all the time. Yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing that and being honest about how hard it can actually be, because to have a really strong ATAR, really great success getting into one of the hardest courses in the country, it can be very easy for people to look on and go, oh, like that's just all perfect. Everything along the way must be smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And for you to share that and go, there's some tough times is really great, because year 12 is a journey. It really is. And there are some tough times along the way. So
Yeah,
I really appreciate you sharing that.
100%. And I think I just want to emphasize, like, I'm sure not even my journey, I'm sure the journey of others and those who are fortunate to get to medicine, even at a high competitive degrees, it's never smooth sailing. I find that in the realistic scenario, it's a very bumpy ride. There's a lot of struggles, a lot of things happening, and no one's having a perfect smooth sailing journey, I'd say. Like, you're not going to obviously be happy or motivated or like very academically driven all the time. Like, you're just not. I think that's realistic, and it's not something that someone should put themselves to like live by that certain standard. And to me, like, that whole image, I guess, is what people saw in me in school. And in a sense, like, I'm glad you saw me in that sense, in which maybe I could be a role model for you to live that way, but I don't want to be seen as like, you shouldn't be expected to live like that. And it wasn't even the way I lived, but it just looked like that. So to me, that image thing is something I hope doesn't affect future, like, other people in the future. Like, I know, like, my previous, like, the predecessors, like, captains from, like, this year.
Yeah.
That was, like, the strong advice I gave to them. I'm like, please, like, if you do feel this image, don't feel like you have to live by it and abide by this just because people are pushing it on you. Just accept that you're, again, another year 12 student, just going through the journey of VCE. And whether you want to get into a really competitive course or not, that does not matter. Just enjoy the process and do the best you can. And I think that's something I was just, like, trying to, give advice to for them. So, yeah.
Being authentic in that.
Legit.
Super important. Yeah.
Exactly. Being authentic, being true to yourself, but also true to those who look up to you, and also the teachers as well. And I think in doing so, they'll appreciate that more, I'd say. So, authenticity.
That's really great advice. Thank you. Yeah, thank you again for sharing all that about your experience. There's one other part of year 12 that we haven't really spoken about.
Yeah.
And that is your UCAT.
Yeah.
So in medicine, you're required to do the UCAT as a part of your entry, which is an aptitude test, essentially, I suppose, a skills-based test, whatever you want to call it. And it's a tough test. I think anyone who takes it on, regardless of how successful they are with the test, will agree that it is a very stressful period. It is a difficult test, and there's a lot of expectation because it's weighed the same as your BCE.
Yeah.
That 2 hours in the test boiled down is the same weighting as 2 years of your BCE, essentially.
Yeah.
So one of the aspects that we haven't spoken about today, and what I want to finish off with, is to talk about the final component of your year 12 that we haven't touched on, which was your UCAT.
Yeah.
So going into med admission, you are required to take on the UCAT, which is a sort of aptitude skills-based test, as I'm sure you know. And that's a big part of med admissions, right? It's at least for Monash, just weighted the same as your BCE. So some really big expectations there. And I'm sure pretty much everyone that's sat the UCAT would agree that it's a really tough test and probably a tough time as well for people working through that. So I'm really interested to hear about how you took on that test and how it also fit into the ensemble that was your year 12 experience.
Definitely. So obviously, because I had so much going on coming into year 12, I knew that start like end of year 11. So I tried to start my UCAT journey quite early on.
Okay.
So around December, January is when I started. And I completed that with, I joined with like Ramad's course with Contour, that UCAT Med Prep. But I'm so glad I was able to do that early on, because it gave me a perfect opportunity and a long time span for me to just work on the UCAT consistently. So if I was to like break down how I completed the UCAT practice, I tried generally doing maybe 30 minutes a day, and just doing that bit by bit, that accumulates so much, and as a result, you become better and better. And to me, in doing so, I found that it's much better strategy than like maybe like doing 2-3 hours one day. Like maybe 2 days a week you do 3 hours of UCAT prep, because in doing so, just practicing that much, I don't find it to be that beneficial, because it's a very skills-based exam. And as a result, it's more so you need to fine-tune your skills bit by bit over time. And so the way I tackled it was, like I said, 30 minutes a day, and I just kept doing that. And obviously, as you got closer and closer to the exam day, I maybe ramped it up a bit more. So I'd say like 30 minutes to an hour to an hour, 30 minutes. And then I was doing maybe like very last few weeks, I was doing maybe 2 hours a day, just fine tuning and going through practice mock exams basically. But one thing I'm grateful for, which with the UCAT course we have in Contour, is the live mocks.
Okay.
The live mocks. So basically, just in case you don't know what live mocks, it's just like a whole simulation of the whole process. So the whole process of checking in, entering into the examination room, going through that whole process, and then exiting out and having a bit of a debrief, and simulating that whole experience. It helped mentally, just for you to like be used to the environment and to make sure that maybe like the anxiousness and nerves that you get with the whole examination, they can be lowered and minimized as much as possible by doing those simulations. So I completing those as well as my own practice and with the course was generally my plan of attack for the whole process. But in terms of balancing, trying to balance obviously UCAT, school VCE and other commitments, it was such a challenge, I'll be honest. Like it's something that like I can't emphasize. I don't even know how I did it, to be honest. Like it was so tough. But again, I legit think it goes down to the fact of just consistency of doing a tiny bit. It doesn't have to be that much, just doing a bit by bit every day. And if you can't do a certain day, that's fine. But again, going back into it and just doing 30 minutes, even 10 minutes a day during busy times, and just like reviewing the UCAT basically. So yeah.
A marathon, not a sprint.
Legit, perfect way to explain it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your experience of the actual UCAT day? You've already spoken a little bit about the mock experience and how it kind of diffused some of the tension, eased the nerves a little bit, but what was it actually like doing the test for real?
100%. Because coming from Bendigo, I'd obviously travel down to Box Hill, which is where I did my.
You might have Box Hill as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
I actually walked past there the other day, past the centre, and I got like
it was like a bit of shivering, like trauma.
Yeah.
But I remember. So I booked it there, 10 a.m. session. So I slept over the night before.
Nice.
So I tried to prepare myself by the day before I went to the exam room, try to get a vibe of everything, just so like it wasn't too much of a new environment. But yeah, coming into the exam, you're gonna have nerves. I was so nervous, so anxious, so worried. It's like it's natural. But I remember just going up the lift and then going into the waiting room. You just see all the students. They have their priming booklets. They're all stressed, and it just stressed me out. And I'm just like, oh god, like it's real. It is real, and like it's a whole epiphany kind of. You're like, wow, it's actually happening in
it's like waiting for a doctor's appointment. Everyone's sitting like facing forwards in like a waiting room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can see all the parents there lined up waiting for theirs, like children for those who've finished already.
Yeah.
And the whole process, like the ID check-in, it's so strict. And
they sort of like dawdle you out to the desk.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Exactly. Like, get the ID. Like, and they do so many ID checks. Have to check like glasses, ID. If you're wearing a jacket, take that off.
Yep.
Like it's so strict.
It is.
But that's the thing with the simulations that I completed before, that was already completed. So it wasn't too much of a surprise to me. And luckily, I think my nerves and so on, they weren't too bad. Like they're going to be there, but like I was still in a point where it wasn't going to affect my exam necessarily.
Yeah.
So I remember I was priming. I knew that at the end of the day, it's a really important exam, but I realized that very early on. So it didn't stress me as much. But I found that a lot of students, it seems like they stress about the fact that it's so important, and that really does affect their performance and their results. So something that I find that a lot of students should do is just, accept that, this exam, if you want to get into medicine, dentistry, anything like that, it is a very important exam and you can't take that away. But understanding that and accepting that early on is so perfect for you then to just focus on the actual exam itself. So that's what I try to do. And I remember walking into the room, having that mindset of, look, I've completed as much work as I can. I have no regrets. Whatever happens, happens. Just smash out the exam and see where it goes. So that was how I did try to walk in, trying to think like that. And then, I remember going in, the rooms, it was really nice. Chairs were comfy.
Yep.
It was a pretty seamless experience. It was quite nice. And, I remember completing the exam, coming out. And
do you remember in between? You were walking, you were leaving. Do you remember? I barely remember the test.
Yeah, I can't really discuss it because in between, I was too in the moment. Yeah, I can't even think about how it was. I remember just like
it's a flow state.
It is
like lock in.
Such a flow state. It's just like I remember having those little 1 minute breaks in between. And I'm like, okay, lock in, next section, move on. And I remember my verbal reasoning was like, it was not too bad, but I was like, oh, was it okay? But I remember that gap between verbal reasoning and DM. I told myself, look, you can't stress about what happened. Just keep moving
It's
forward.
in the past.
It's in the past.
And it can shake you, the order
It
as well.
does.
It can shake you. I was the same, like my verbal reasoning. I was like, oh my goodness, there was lots of really long scenarios. Like I wasn't sure how it went. And you've got to just snap out of it as you move
Exactly.
into the next test. Because that's in the past now.
Exactly. And I think that you just have to understand that, look, that one's done. You can't control whatever happened to that mock, that subtest, but just go on to the next one, do as the best you can, move on to the next one, and just keep going. And eventually you're going to finish. And that's what I just kept telling myself. And I think, I was quite happy with my DM result. And I think that was because of how I primed in that 1 minute gap. And so that's why I realized those little 1 minutes in between are so important. But like we said before, you're in the flow state. It's so hard to remember like what was going on. But yeah, coming out of the exam, biggest sigh of relief. It felt like weight was off my shoulders. It felt like I completed VC.
Yes.
It was like the first step. I'm like, Dad, I was completed. And so I was so happy. I was relaxed. My parents were there, and we went out for some lunch and so on. And but the results come really quick.
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
30 minutes, yeah.
20, 30 minutes.
It's not like the VCE where you wait 2 months until
No,
that
not at all.
day.
No, exactly. That day you get it.
Yeah.
And yes, obviously it was a bit nerve-wracking, but again, I remember trying to just like prime and mentally prepare myself. Like, look, if the score's not what I wanted, it's fine. Because again, I try to think of it as in you have no regrets. You've done the best you can, so why should you be worried? And if you didn't get the score that you necessarily wanted, that's fine. There's so many alternatives to do, and there's so many options in the future. Like it's never a be all end all realistically. But yeah, I remember opening the results. I was quite relieved. I was quite happy, and that was generally the whole journey for that one day.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's all over very quickly, isn't it? It really, really is. I think it was particularly compelling for me with the UCAT that it was such a big thing in my like year 12 journey because of the med goal.
Yeah.
But everyone else who doesn't know what the UCAT is, it's not even like you might mention, I'm doing the UCAT today, and they'll go, oh, like, okay. Like it doesn't have that same significance. And I think it was a challenge to kind of remedy that. The reason I'm so stressed is because this test matters a lot.
Yeah.
And to have a couple of people around you where you can go, yeah, this is really stressing me out, and they understand that's really cool.
Yep.
Did you have a couple of people who were also sitting the UCAT alongside?
Yeah, I did. And I think that's one thing I want to touch on is how like doing it with friends, it can be really good because you want to all do well together. And but I remember because my friends did it in Bendigo actually, and that was like the first day of the UCAT.
There you go.
Yeah, so they completed it and they were really happy with their scores. But one thing I tried to make sure was not for it to mentally affect me. And I find that a lot of students who do the UCAT together, you don't want it to form this like toxicity of like competition and trying to like outdo each other.
Yeah.
But rather support each other through the whole process. And so I remember like I was really happy for them, but I didn't want it to affect me and like how I was going into my exam. So like I went on to complete my results and just keep practicing as my friends already finished, and completed the exam and I was happy with it. So, yeah.
Awesome. To finish off, I'm really keen, if you were to give one tip for a student who's either thinking about doing the UCAT, currently doing the UCAT, or maybe has even got their UCAT next week, depending on when this is watched, what would that tip be?
Yeah, I'd say for those who are going to go into the UCAT currently, just, again, balance and consistency. Those, I know it's hard, easier said than done, but it is simple as that. If you put in the effort and do a little bit every single day or even a bit every now and then, you will see results and you'll see improvements. And it's even better to do with friends because you will support each other as you complete it. But again, it's just completing that work and doing it bit by bit, but also knowing that you don't want to fully commit all your time with that. You want to make time for your mental and physical health. And if you don't prioritize those other factors, it will then affect your end results. That's why, for me, balance and consistency is so important. And it's understanding that it is an important exam, but just know yourself, your physical and mental health is more important, and it should be your utmost highest priority. And you should never put like an exam or like ATAR above that. And that's something I think that's quite ignored, I'd say. A lot of the students ignore that and don't realize that until it's too late. So something that I think is really important to understand. Obviously, for those who are completing their UCAT very soon, just understand that like you've done all the work you can. Just don't have any regrets. Just accept that you've done the best you can, and you should just smash it out realistically. And look, if it doesn't go out the way you want it to be, just know there are so many other options and alternatives you can go towards. And if it does, then yeah, congrats. And yeah, but don't just keep working. That don't like kind of slack off. Like yeah, enjoy yourself, but like know that the job isn't done basically. So yeah, that's awesome.
Akshat, thank you so much for sharing that tip, and also for sharing all of this wonderful, all of these wonderful thoughts with me this morning, and so many great lessons in taking care of yourself, in achieving that consistency, and in achieving that balance as well. So thank you so very much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate our conversation.
And thank you for having me. Like, I appreciate the opportunity just to come in here and talk, because I think there's so many things that, having gone through it, there's so many things I'd love to just mention and say. Like I said, balance, consistency during year 12, and just enjoying your whole year 12 in a general sense. So yeah, thank you for having me as well.
My absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Izzy, thank you, dude.